The doctor looked at my body and said, "Another lazy fat pig taking up space." He had no idea I was the woman who signed his paychecks. He was about to find out. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. I never told anyone what happened to me in room 407. Not for weeks. Not while I was trapped in that bed, unable to speak, unable to move properly, unable to defend myself. I just lay there blinking, listening, remembering every single word, every insult, every cruel laugh, every moment of humiliation, and I stored it all away, like evidence in a case I knew I would eventually win. Let me tell you who I really am, because Dr. Marcus Webb never knew. To him I was just another fat old black woman taking up space in his hospital. Another Medicaid patient. Another burden on the system. Another lazy pig who'd eaten herself into a stroke and now expected him to fix it. He never knew that the woman he tortured for 2 weeks was Dr. Lorraine Baptiste, former Surgeon General of the United States, founder and medical director of Baptiste Medical Foundation, a network of 47 hospitals across 12 states worth $4.2 billion. He never knew that the hospital he worked in, the bed I was lying in, the very paycheck he deposited every 2 weeks, all of it belonged to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. I was in my office at the foundation headquarters, reviewing acquisition proposals for 2 new hospitals in the Midwest. My assistant brought me coffee, black, no sugar, the way I'd been drinking it for 40 years. I took a sip, set it down, and that's when I felt it. A strange sensation in my right hand, numbness, tingling. I tried to pick up my pen and it fell. I woke up 3 days later in Metropolitan General Hospital, one of my own hospitals, though I didn't know it at the time. The stroke had affected my speech center and my right side. I could think perfectly, my mind was sharp, clear, processing everything. But my body wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't speak beyond hoarse whispers. I couldn't write legibly. I could barely move my right arm and leg. And because I'd been alone when it happened, because my assistant had panicked and just screamed for an ambulance, because the EMTs had grabbed my wallet but not my briefcase with my business cards, because the hospital admitted me through emergency intake, I came in as just another Jane Doe. That's who I was to them. Nobody. Nothing. Invisible. I was placed in a shared room, room 407, with another elderly woman named Gloria Henderson. Mrs. Henderson was recovering from pneumonia, sharp as a tack, and she would become my witness to everything that followed, because what followed was 2 weeks of the most humiliating, degrading, cruel treatment I have ever experienced in my 68 years of life. And it all started when Dr. Marcus Webb walked into my room for the first time. I heard him before I saw him. His voice carried down the hallway, loud, confident, arrogant. He was talking to medical students, playing the role of the brilliant teacher. "Morning rounds, people. Let's see what fresh disasters await us today." They entered my room in a cluster. Dr. Webb in front, tall and imposing in his expensive suit under his white coat, and 6 medical students trailing behind him like ducklings. He didn't look at me first. He looked at the chart hanging on the end of my bed. He picked it up, scanned it, and then he laughed. Actually laughed. Medicaid, no family listed, stroke victim, age 68, let me guess, probably been living off government assistance her whole life. The students shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a young woman, said quietly, "Dr. Webb, shouldn't we examine the patient first?" He waved her off. We will. But first, let's establish what we're dealing with here." He finally looked at me. His eyes traveled slowly from my face down my body, and his expression changed to something between disgust and contempt. "Jesus. Look at her. How much does she weigh? 250, 270. I tried to gesture with my left hand, the one that still worked partially. I was trying to indicate that I could hear him, that I was conscious, that I was a person. He noticed my movement and actually mimicked it, shaking his hand in a mocking tremor. Oh, the fat lady's trying to communicate. How precious. Some students laughed nervously. Others looked at the floor. Mrs. Henderson, in the bed next to me, made a small sound of protest. Dr. Webb glanced at her. "Something wrong, Grandma?" she said firmly. "That's incredibly disrespectful." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "What's disrespectful is letting yourself go like this patient has. Look at her. Look at her. He turned back to the students, using me as a teaching prop. This is what happens when you spend your entire life making bad choices. Obesity, hypertension, diabetes, I guarantee she has all three. And now we're supposed to break our backs taking care of her. This fat pig probably can't even remember her own name. The words hit me like physical blows. He continued his lecture, warming to his theme, listen up. Because this is important. These patients, and we see them every day, they're bed blockers. They come in with conditions that are 99% self-inflicted. Obesity, smoking, drug use, non-compliance with medications. They make terrible choices their whole lives. And then they show up here expecting us to perform miracles. He gestured at me again. This woman right here, she's lazy. She's been lazy her whole life. Look at that body. That doesn't happen by accident. That's decades of sitting on a couch, eating garbage, contributing nothing to society, and now we have to pay for it. The taxpayers have to pay for it. Because she has Medicaid, which means every dollar we spend on her is a dollar that comes from people who actually work. One of the medical students, a young black man, spoke up hesitantly. Dr. Webb, we don't actually know her history. Webb cut him off sharply. Don't we look at her? The evidence is right there. Morbidly obese, elderly, no family support, government insurance. What other history do we need? He turned back to me. Let me ask you something, even though you probably can't understand me. Did you ever exercise? Even once? Did you ever think about what you were putting in your mouth? Or did you just eat and eat and eat, like a pig at a trough? I couldn't speak. I could only blink and let the tears fall. He saw them and laughed again. Oh, now she's crying. Truth hurts, doesn't it? Mrs. Henderson said loudly. Get out of this room, get out. Dr. Webb smiled at her pleasantly. One more outburst and I'll have you moved to a different floor. This fat pig needs to hear the truth. Maybe if someone had told her 30 years ago that she was disgusting, she wouldn't be here now. He did a cursory physical exam, barely touching me, rushing through it, and then announced to the students, prognosis is poor. These massive stroke patients with multiple comorbidities rarely recover meaningful function. We'll stabilize her, keep her here the minimum required time, then transfer her to a county facility. There's no point wasting ICU resources on someone like this. And then he left, trailing his students behind him, leaving me lying there with tears streaming down my face and rage building in my chest like a fire that would eventually consume him. Mrs. Henderson immediately pressed her call button. A nurse came in, a black woman around 35 with kind eyes and Keisha Williams, RN on her badge. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. What happened? Mrs. Henderson told her everything. That was day one. The next 2 weeks got worse. So much worse. Dr. Marcus Webb seemed to take personal pleasure in humiliating me. Every morning during rounds, he would bring his students in and use me as an example of everything wrong with the American healthcare system. Patient 407B, he would say, never using my name because he never bothered to learn it. Classic Homer. Get out of my emergency room. Old obese, multiple complications, no insurance worth anything. These patients drain resources that could be used for people who actually take care of themselves. He would stand at the foot of my bed and deliver lectures about personal responsibility, about the obesity epidemic, about how people like me were bankrupting the healthcare system, and I would lie there unable to defend myself, unable to speak, just listening and remembering every word. On day 3, he brought a larger group of residents through. There must have been 10 or 12 of them crowding into my room. He was in a particularly foul mood that day. All right, people, gather round. Today we're going to talk about the economics of healthcare, specifically the cost-benefit analysis of treating patients like this one. He gestured at me like I was an object in a museum. How much do you think we spend per day keeping her alive? Anyone want to guess? A young resident said hesitantly, maybe $1,000? Webb shook his head. Try 3,000. She chose to eat too much. She chose not to exercise. She chose to be lazy. And now, when she's facing the consequences of those choices, she expects society to bail her out. I tried to move my left hand to gesture, to somehow communicate that I was still a person, still conscious, still there. He saw the movement and his lip curled. Oh, she's moving. How miraculous. Look, everyone, the fat pig is trying to tell us something. He leaned down close to my face. His breath smelled like coffee. What is it? You want food? Of course you do. That's all you people ever want. More food, more pills, more attention. Well, guess what? You don't deserve it. Mrs. Henderson exploded. How dare you? How dare you speak to another human being like that? Dr. Webb straightened up, his face cold. Mrs. Henderson, this is a teaching hospital. I'm conducting a teaching round. If you can't be quiet, I'll have you moved. Good, she shouted. Move me, because I don't want to be in the same room as a monster. He smiled. A monster? I'm being honest. This woman is morbidly obese. That's a medical fact. She has poor hygiene. Look at her hair, her nails. She clearly hasn't taken care of herself in years. Maybe decades, and now she's taking up a bed that could be used for someone who actually deserves it. Someone who worked hard, who took care of themselves, who contributed to society. But instead, we're stuck with this lazy fat pig, who probably hasn't worked a day in her life. I was sobbing now, silently, tears running down into my hair. The humiliation was complete. And still he wasn't done. He turned back to the residents. I want you all to remember this case when you're deciding what kind of doctor you want to be. Do you want to waste your careers on people like this? Or do you want to specialize in something meaningful, something that actually makes a difference? One of the residents, an older woman who looked like she'd come to medicine as a second career, spoke up. Dr. Webb, with all due respect, every patient deserves dignity. His face went hard. Dignity is earned, not given, and this patient earned nothing but contempt. He walked out, leaving a wake of uncomfortable silence. The moment they were gone, Nurse Keisha rushed in. She'd been listening from the hallway. She came straight to my bedside with tissues, wiping my face gently. Rain, honey, this has to stop. This is abuse. Let me report him, please. I gestured for the notepad again. She held it up and I wrote, my hand shaking so badly the letters were barely legible. He will destroy himself. I just need time. Trust me. She read it and her eyes widened. What does that mean? Rain, who are you? I wrote one more thing. Someone he should have been afraid of. She stared at the words for a long time, then looked at my face. She saw something there, some hint of the power I used to carry, some glimpse of who I really was. Okay, she said slowly. Okay, I'll wait, but I'm documenting everything. Every word he says, every action he takes. I'm building a file. I blinked once. Yes, good, because I was building a file too in my mind, in my memory. Every insult was recorded, every cruel word was stored away. Dr. Marcus Webb thought he was untouchable. He thought his credentials, his position, his arrogance made him invincible. He had no idea that the fat pig in room 407 was actually the woman who owned everything he thought he controlled. But he was about to find out. Day 5 brought a new horror. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke up needing to use the bathroom. I pressed my call button and waited. And waited. 20 minutes passed. My bladder was screaming. I pressed the button again, more frantically. Nothing. Finally, inevitably, I lost control. The warm shame of it spread beneath me and I started crying again. Not from pain but from pure humiliation. I was 68 years old, a former surgeon general, and I'd just wet myself like a child. The night nurse finally came in 30 minutes later. She was kind about it, matter of fact, helping me get cleaned up without judgment. I'm so sorry, she whispered. We're understaffed tonight. Dr. Webb cut the nursing budget again. She got me changed and into a fresh gown, changed the sheets, and I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't, because Dr. Webb came in for morning rounds just as the night shift was finishing their report. He smelled it immediately, that distinctive smell of industrial cleaner that hospitals use, which means there's been a mess. What happened here? He demanded. The night nurse, exhausted from her shift, made the mistake of telling the truth. The patient had an accident. She'd been pressing the call button but we were too short-staffed to respond quickly. His face went red. An accident. This disgusting pig pissed herself. The day shift nurses were arriving, including Keisha. People were gathering in the doorway. Dr. Webb was building up steam, getting louder. Are you kidding me right now? This is a hospital, not a nursing home. This is disgusting. He turned to me. I was mortified, humiliated beyond anything I'd ever experienced. You're repulsive. You know that, inside and out. You can't control your own body. You can't speak. You can't move. You're basically a vegetable, a fat, useless vegetable taking up space and resources. You probably can't even reach to wipe yourself properly. Can you? With all that fat in the way? Mrs. Henderson was screaming at him to stop. Nurse Keisha was saying, Dr. Webb, that's enough. But he was on a roll now, his cruelty fully unleashed. You're less than human. You're less than an animal. Animals have more dignity than you. You're just existing. Breathing air that someone else could use. Taking up space. Being disgusting. He looked around at the students who'd gathered for rounds. See this, everyone? This is what happens when you let yourself go. This is the end result of a lifetime of laziness and gluttony. You become this. He pointed at me like I was an exhibit. A fat pig who can't even control her own bladder. That's when I broke. Not on the outside. I couldn't make a sound beyond a whimper. But inside, something crystallized. The rage that had been building for 5 days suddenly became cold and clear and focused. I stopped crying. I looked directly at Dr. Marcus Webb, really looked at him, and I blinked slowly, deliberately, and in that moment, some instinct must have told him he'd made a mistake. His rant faltered slightly. He saw something in my eyes that made him uncomfortable, but then his arrogance reasserted itself and he turned away, dismissing me from his attention entirely. Get her cleaned up properly and air this room out. The smell is nauseating. He walked out. The moment he was gone, Nurse Keisha came to me. Rain, she said urgently, quietly, you need to tell me who you are. You need to tell me right now, because this has crossed every line, and I can't just document it anymore. I need to know who to call. I gestured for the notepad. My hand was steadier now, fueled by rage rather than shaking with humiliation. I wrote carefully, clearly, I am Dr. Lorraine Baptiste, former Surgeon General, Medical Director of Baptiste Medical Foundation. Call my son James. His number is... I wrote out the number. Keisha stared at what I'd written. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're Dr. Baptiste? The Dr. Baptiste? I blinked. Yes. Oh my God, you own this hospital, you own this hospital. I blinked again. Yes. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. He called you, he's been calling you. Oh my God, he's finished. He's completely finished. I wrote one more thing. Not yet. Let him keep going. I want everything documented. Every word. Every action. Let him bury himself completely. Keisha read it and understanding dawned on her face. You're building a case. I blinked. Yes. You want him to think he's getting away with it. Yes. So he'll keep doing it and we'll have everything we need to destroy him. Yes. She nodded slowly, a fierce smile spreading across her face. Okay. I'm with you. I'll call your son from my car during break. And Rain, Dr. Baptiste, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I promise you, we're going to make him pay for every single word. She left to make the call and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the power returning to me piece by piece. Not physical power, my body was still broken, still recovering, but mental power, strategic power, the power that came from 40 years of navigating corporate medicine, hospital politics and boardroom wars. Dr. Marcus Webb had no idea what was coming for him. He'd mistaken my silence for weakness, my paralysis for helplessness, my sighs for worthlessness. He'd revealed his true nature, his cruelty, his complete lack of humanity, and I'd let him do it. I'd let him dig his own grave deeper and deeper with every insult, every slur, every moment of torture, because I knew something he didn't. The moment I could speak again, the moment I could stand again, the moment I revealed who I truly was, his entire world would come crashing down, and I would make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of monster he really was. An hour later, my son James called the hospital main line asking to speak to someone about patient Lorraine Baptiste in room 407. The call went through channels until it reached Dr. Raymond Foster, the hospital administrator. I didn't know this was happening in real time, but I found out later from James. Dr. Foster had apparently looked up my file, seen Medicaid patient, no family, and told James there must be some mistake. James had said calmly, "There's no mistake. That's my mother, Dr. Lorraine Baptiste, and you need to check who owns your hospital." There was apparently a long silence on the phone, then the sound of typing, then a strangled sound from Dr. Foster. As he realized, James told me later that Foster had stammered. We didn't know her intake information. James had cut him off. "I'm sure you didn't. I'm sure Dr. Marcus Webb didn't know either when he was calling her a fat pig for the last 5 days, when he was starving her, when he was humiliating her in front of students. Yes, we know everything. My mother is conscious. She's been conscious the whole time. And now you're going to tell me exactly what you're going to do about it." But James, Following my instructions relayed through Nurse Keisha didn't demand immediate action. Instead, he said, "My mother wants this to continue. She wants Dr. Webb to keep being himself. She wants everything documented by your staff. And when she's ready, when she's recovered enough to speak clearly and walk back into your hospital on her own 2 feet, then we're going to have a conversation about Dr. Webb's future. Do you understand?" Foster had apparently agreed immediately. Terrified, James had continued, "In the meantime, my mother's care is going to improve. A private duty nurse will be coming in, posed as a volunteer. You will approve this immediately. My mother will start getting proper therapy, but Dr. Webb is not to know any of this. As far as he's concerned, she's still just patient 407B, the fat pig he enjoys torturing. Clear. Crystal clear." James and his brother Darius, my adopted son, my right hand in the business, arrived that afternoon, posing as church volunteers. They came with flowers and smiles, and when Dr. Webb glanced into my room and saw them, he didn't think twice. Just church people visiting random patients. He had no idea he was looking at the CEO and COO of the organization that owned his hospital. James came to my bedside and took my hand. His eyes were wet. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry. We didn't know you were here. Why didn't you have your ID on you? Why?" I squeezed his hand weakly, gestured for the notepad, wrote, "Doesn't matter. I'm okay, but we wait. Let him finish destroying himself." Darius was pacing at the foot of my bed, furious. "Mom, he called you a fat pig, multiple times. I want to go down to his office right now," and I shook my head hard, wrote, "No, we do this my way, legal, complete, total. When I'm done with him, he'll never practice medicine again, but only if we do it right." James read what I wrote and nodded slowly. Okay, we'll do it your way, but Mom, please, let us at least get you better care," I wrote, "already arranged through Foster, but secret. Webb can't know." Both my sons looked at each other, then back at me, and I saw them understanding. Their mother wasn't broken. She was strategizing. She was planning a war, and Dr. Marcus Webb was about to become a casualty of his own cruelty. Over the next week, my care improved dramatically but subtly. The volunteer who came in daily was actually a highly trained private duty nurse. She helped me with physical therapy when Dr. Webb wasn't around. She brought me better food. She worked on my speech with me in whispers and quiet exercises. My strength was returning. My voice was coming back. But whenever Dr. Webb appeared, I would go limp, helpless, silent, playing the role he'd assigned me, the fat pig who couldn't defend herself. Day 8 brought one of his cruelest performances yet. He had scheduled a grand rounds presentation in the hospital auditorium, one of those big teaching sessions where doctors from all departments come to learn about interesting cases. The topic was resource allocation in modern healthcare, making difficult decisions. I found out later that he'd specifically chosen me as his case study. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was watching TV in my room, when I saw the hospital's internal channel switch to live coverage of the presentation. There was Dr. Webb, standing at a podium in front of maybe 200 medical professionals, and on the screen behind him was my chart, my full medical chart, with my photo from intake, unconscious, vulnerable, at my worst. "Patient 407B, he began, and my blood ran cold. 68-year-old black female, weight 207 pounds, admitted with massive stroke, Medicaid patient, no family support, multiple comorbidities all related to obesity." He clicked to the next slide. It showed my body measurements, my lab values, my medications, all of it displayed for hundreds of people to see. This was a HIPAA violation of the highest order, and he didn't even care. "This patient represents everything wrong with American healthcare today," he continued. "She's spent her entire life being non-compliant, making poor choices, and now society is expected to foot the bill. We spend $3,000 a day keeping her alive. For what purpose? What quality of life will she have? What will she contribute?" He clicked again and another photo appeared. This one taken without my knowledge or consent, showing me in my hospital bed, looking exactly like what I was. A sick, helpless, elderly woman. The audience murmured uncomfortably. Someone in the back said something I couldn't hear. Dr. Webb responded, "I know it seems harsh, but we have to be honest with ourselves. These patients, the morbidly obese, the non-compliant, the ones who've spent decades destroying their own bodies, they drain resources that could save lives that are actually worth saving. Worth saving." He'd said it, out loud. in front of 200 witnesses. I wasn't worth saving, because I was fat, because I was old, because I was black, and on Medicaid. Mrs. Henderson, watching the same broadcast in her bed, was crying. Rain, oh Rain, this is evil, this is pure evil. I wasn't crying anymore. I was watching with cold calculation, memorizing every word, every image, every second. This would all be evidence, every bit of. Dr. Webb continued. Now I'm not suggesting we actively harm these patients. I'm simply asking us to consider the ethics of aggressive treatment. This woman will never walk again. She'll never speak clearly. She'll never live independently. She's basically a vegetable with a heartbeat. And yet we're supposed to exhaust every resource trying to give her 6 more months in a nursing home. He looked directly at the camera. Directly at me, though he didn't know I was watching. If this were my grandmother, I'd pull the plug. I'd let her go with dignity rather than keeping her alive in this disgusting state. But we can't say that out loud in modern medicine, can we? We have to pretend every life has equal value, even when we all know that's not true. The audience was shifting now. Some were nodding, and that horrified me almost as much as Webb's words. Some were shaking their heads. A few were standing up to leave. One doctor, a black woman around 50, stood and said loudly, "This is unethical and racist, and I won't be part of it." She walked out. Dr. Webb shrugged. And there's your politically correct response. But in private, every doctor in this room has thought exactly what I'm saying. We just don't have the courage to admit it. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes. He showed statistics about obesity-related healthcare costs. He showed studies about recovery rates for massive stroke patients. He showed everything except what mattered, that I was a human being who deserved respect and care regardless of my size, my age, my race, or my insurance status. When it finally ended, I lay in my bed shaking, not with weakness but with rage so pure it felt like it could burn through steel. Nurse Keisha rushed in. "Did you see it? Did you see what he just did?" I nodded. She held up her phone. I recorded the whole thing, every second. And Rain, Dr. Baptiste. There were at least 20 people in that audience who looked sick at what they were hearing. Potential witnesses. I gestured for the pad. Wrote, "Good. Add it to the file. How much longer until I can speak clearly?" She checked my chart from the private nurse. "Another week, maybe 2. Your speech therapy is going incredibly well, much faster than normal stroke recovery," I wrote. "Because I'm motivated. When I can speak, when I can walk into that hospital boardroom on my own 2 feet, that's when we act, not before." Keisha nodded. "Your sons are outside. They want to see you." I nodded and she let them in. James and Darius came in quietly, and I could see they'd been watching the broadcast too. Both of them looked ready to commit murder. "Mom," James said, his voice tight with control, "that was a federal crime. HIPAA violation, patient privacy, medical ethics violations. We could have him arrested today." I shook my head. Wrote, "Not yet. Let him think he won. Let him get comfortable. The fall will be harder." Darius said, "Mom, how much more of this can you take? How much more should you have to take?" I wrote carefully, "As much as it takes to make sure he never does this to anyone else ever again. This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability." Day 10 brought the dietary incident. It was lunchtime, and a dietary aide brought my tray pureed food, thickened liquids, everything modified for stroke patients who have trouble swallowing. It looked unappetizing, but it was nutrition I needed. I was actually starting to feel hungry again, a good sign of recovery. The aide set it down and left. I was using my left hand to try to manage the spoon when Dr. Webb walked in. He wasn't scheduled for rounds. He was just passing by and saw me. He stopped in the doorway and watched me struggle with the spoon for a moment. A strange smile on his face. Then he walked in, picked up my lunch tray and held it up. "Look at this," he said. "Look at this. Even in the hospital, even after a massive stroke, you're still eating. You know what I'm going to do?" Before I could process what was happening, he walked to the trash can and started dumping my food. The soup, the pudding, the juice, everything. "You don't need this," he said. Conversationally, like he was explaining something reasonable. "You've got enough stored fat on your body to survive for months without eating. Maybe starving a little will teach you some discipline you clearly never learned." I stared at him in disbelief. He was starving me, intentionally withholding food from a recovering stroke patient. This wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was medical malpractice that could literally kill me. He tossed the empty tray back on my table. You can thank me later when you've lost some weight. Then he left. I sat there in shock for a moment before the tears came. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of pure rage mixed with hunger and helplessness. Mrs. Henderson immediately pressed her call button repeatedly until Nurse Keisha came running. He took her food, Mrs. Henderson said urgently. Dr. Webb came in and threw away her entire lunch and told her she didn't need to eat. Keisha's face went white. He what? She looked at me and saw the empty tray, saw my tears, and her expression transformed into something fierce. That's it. That's medical abuse. That's attempted harm of a patient. I don't care what your plan is, Rain. This crosses the line. I gestured frantically for the pad. Wrote, my hand shaking. Add it to the file. Get me food secretly. But this is perfect. This proves intent to harm. Keep building the case. She looked at me like I was crazy. You want to let him starve you? I wrote. 1 meal. I can handle 1 meal. But now we have him on something criminal. Not just unethical. Trust me. She stood there for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 1 meal. But I'm bringing you food from the cafeteria in 30 minutes and I don't care who sees me. She left and returned within 20 minutes with a full meal from the staff cafeteria. She helped me eat, and while I ate she told me, Dr. Okoye was in the hallway when Webb did that. She saw the whole thing through the door. She's already written it up as a formal observation. We're collecting witnesses everywhere. Good. That was very good. Dr. Patricia Okoye was an attending physician, senior to Webb, and her testimony would carry weight. Day 12 brought what I can only describe as a public spectacle. Dr. Webb was hosting a group of wealthy hospital donors, potential contributors to the new surgical wing. He was giving them a tour of the facilities, showing off the hospital like it was his personal achievement. I didn't know this was happening until I heard voices in the hallway getting closer. Mrs. Henderson had been moved to a private room by then. Dr. Foster's quiet attempt to get at least one witness away from Webb's abuse. So I was alone in 407. The door opened and Dr. Webb led in 6 well-dressed people, all white, all clearly wealthy. And this is our ICU floor. He was saying in his tour guide voice, we have excellent facilities, excellent staff, state-of-the-art equipment. Then he saw me and his expression changed. He got an idea, a terrible idea. Actually, let me show you something, he said to the donors. He led them fully into my room. I was lying in bed, watching TV, trying to do the arm exercises my private nurse had shown me. This, Dr. Webb announced, is what we're up against in modern healthcare. This is the burden of Medicaid expansion, of government programs that incentivize poor health choices. The donors looked uncomfortable. One woman, maybe 60 years old with perfectly styled silver hair, said hesitantly, Doctor, should we be in a patient's room? Webb waved her off. It's fine. She barely understands what's happening anyway. He gestured at me like I was an exhibit. This patient, obese, elderly, stroke victim, non-compliant her entire life, represents everything wrong with the system. Look at her size. That body is a choice, a lifetime of bad choices. Sitting on the couch, eating fast food, never exercising, never taking responsibility. And now we're supposed to warehouse her. Society is supposed to pay for her bad decision. A younger man in an expensive suit said, This seems, she's right here. She can hear you. Dr. Webb actually laughed. So, maybe she needs to hear it. Maybe if someone had called her a fat lazy pig years ago, told her the truth about what she was doing to herself, she wouldn't be here taking up space and resources. He turned back to me. You did this to yourself. You understand that, right? Every cheeseburger, every bucket of fried chicken, every day you chose to sit instead of move. This stroke, you earned it. And now taxpayers, good people like these donors who actually contribute to society, they have to foot the bill for your laziness. I could feel my face burning with humiliation, but I stayed still, stayed silent, let him keep talking, because every word was another nail in his coffin. An older man in the donor group cleared his throat. Dr. Webb, I'm not sure this is appropriate. Perhaps we should continue the tour. Webb looked annoyed at being interrupted. Of course, I just wanted you to see the reality of what we deal with. These patients come in waves. They clog the system. They never pay. We're not a charity, but we're forced to act like one. As they started to leave, one of the donors, a black woman around 50 who'd been silent until now, stopped and looked directly at me. Our eyes met. She saw my tears, saw my awareness, saw my humanity, and she said quietly, She understands every word you're saying. Dr. Webb shrugged. Doesn't matter, she'll forget in 5 minutes. Stroke brain. The woman stared at him for a long moment, disgust clear on her face. Then she said, I won't be contributing to this hospital, not while it employs people like you. She walked out. Dr. Webb called after her. Ma'am, I think you're misunderstanding, but she was gone. He turned back to the remaining donors with a forced smile. Some people are too sensitive for the realities of medicine. Shall we continue? They left. The moment the door closed, I let out a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a scream, just a release of everything I'd been holding in, but underneath the humiliation was something else. Satisfaction, because that donor had seen. She'd witnessed his cruelty, and there was a good chance she'd talk about what she'd seen. The web of witnesses was growing. That afternoon, my private nurse, a woman named Sandra, who was actually one of the top stroke rehabilitation specialists in the state, came in for our secret therapy session. Dr. Baptiste, she said quietly, your progress is remarkable. Your speech is almost completely back. Your right side strength is returning faster than I've ever seen. You could probably walk with assistance right now, I whispered back, my voice still hoarse but clear enough. How much longer until I can walk into a room on my own and speak without any weakness in my voice? Sandra considered. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. With intensive therapy every day. Maybe less. Make it less, I want to be at full strength. I want to walk into a boardroom, looking powerful, sounding powerful. I want there to be no doubt in anyone's mind that I'm completely recovered and completely capable. She nodded, understanding. Then we work harder. But Rain. Dr. Baptiste, are you sure you want to wait? What he's doing to you, what he's doing to me, I said clearly, is giving me everything I need to ensure he never practices medicine again. Every insult, every cruelty, every violation is documented. When I'm ready, when I'm strong, I'm not just going to fire him. I'm going to destroy his career so completely that no hospital in this country will ever hire him. I'm going to make an example of him that will echo through every medical institution. So yes, I'm sure I can take 2 more weeks of this if it means saving every future patient from experiencing what I've experienced. Day 14 brought the cafeteria incident that would become one of the key pieces of evidence. Dr. Webb was having lunch in the hospital cafeteria with a group of residents. He'd ordered a salad, of course he had. The picture of health and discipline. They were sitting near the windows, visible to anyone passing by. My private investigator, hired by James and Darius, happened to be there, posing as a pharmaceutical sales rep. She sat close enough to record their conversation on her phone. Dr. Webb was holding court. As usual. You know what I can't stand, he said between bites of his salad. Fat medical professionals, nurses, doctors, whoever. How can you advise people about health when you clearly don't practice it yourself? It's hypocritical. One of the residents, a young woman who was slightly overweight herself, shifted uncomfortably. I don't know, Dr. Webb. I think people's weight is pretty personal, he snorted. Personal? It's a billboard advertising your lack of self-control, like my patient in 407. That fat pig lying there like she's owed something. These people have no discipline. They eat and eat and eat. And then when their bodies inevitably break down, they expect us to fix their mistakes. Another resident said carefully, isn't that kind of harsh? I mean, there are lots of factors that contribute to obesity. Genetics, environment, socioeconomic. Webb cut him off. Oh, here we go. The excuses. Let me tell you something. I've never seen a fat person in a famine. You know why? Because weight is about calories in versus calories out. It's simple physics. These people eat too much and move too little. Everything else is just excuses for being lazy. A third resident, the young black man who tried to defend me before, spoke up. Dr. Webb, with respect, that's pretty reductive. And calling patients fat pigs is, that's not okay. Webb looked at him coldly. It's honest. And maybe you're too politically correct to say it, but in private, everyone thinks it. We're just not allowed to say it out loud anymore without someone crying discrimination. The young resident persisted, but it is discrimination. You're treating patients differently based on their weight, their insurance, I treat patients based on their value to society. Webb interrupted. Someone who's worked hard, taken care of themselves, contributed, they deserve our full effort. Someone who's spent their whole life being a lazy fat pig, I'll stabilize them and move them through. That's the investigator caught all of it. Every word. That evening she brought the recording to James and Darius. They came to visit me that night after visiting hours with special permission from Dr. Foster, who was now terrified and completely compliant. Mom, James said, playing the recording for me. We have him on tape calling patients fat pigs, admitting he treats them differently based on their size and class. This is discrimination. This is medical ethics violations. This is everything we need. I listened to the recording and felt that cold rage crystallize even further. How much longer? I asked, my voice still slightly hoarse but much stronger. How much longer until I can walk? Sandra, my private nurse who was there for the meeting, said, you could walk now with a cane. You could speak clearly now. You're ready, Dr. Baptiste. I shook my head. Not with a cane. I want to walk in on my own 2 feet. No assistance, no visible weakness. I want to stand in front of him and have him see that the fat pig is completely recovered, completely powerful, and about to end his career. Darius said, Mom, that could take another month. Then it takes another month, I said firmly. I've waited this long. I can wait until I'm at full strength. Because when I confront him, when I reveal who I am, I want there to be no doubt in anyone's mind that I'm superior to him in every possible way. Not just in position, not just in power, but in strength, in recovery, in sheer force of will. I want him to see that everything he said about me was wrong, that I'm not weak, not helpless, not less than human. I want him to see me at my best, before I destroy him. My sons looked at each other, then James nodded slowly. Okay, Mom, we do it your way, but the moment you're ready we move. Agreed, I said. But as it turned out, I didn't have to wait a full month, because Dr. Marcus Webb's cruelty reached a crescendo that forced my hand earlier than planned. It was day 16. A Tuesday morning during routine rounds. I was actually feeling quite good that day. My right arm had significant mobility back. My leg was getting stronger. My speech was almost normal in my private practice sessions with Sandra. I was lying in bed doing subtle exercises when Dr. Webb entered with his usual entourage of medical students. He looked at me and I saw something different in his expression. Not just contempt, but actual hatred. Something had happened to put him in an especially foul mood. I found out later that the black donor from the tour had indeed filed a formal complaint about him, and he'd received a warning from hospital administration that morning. Not a serious warning. Dr. Foster was too afraid to actually discipline him properly, but enough to anger him. And he was taking it out on me. Good morning, patient 407B, he said with false cheerfulness. Still here, I see, still taking up valuable space, still being a burden on society. I didn't react, just watched him with steady eyes. He noticed. Oh, she's awake today. Alert. How wonderful. He came closer to the bed. Let me ask you something. Can you understand me? Do you know where you are? Do you know what a waste of resources you are? I could have spoken. My voice was strong enough now, but I stayed silent. Still playing the role. He leaned down close to my face. You're disgusting. Inside and out. Your body is disgusting. All that fat, all those rolls, that complete lack of self-control written all over you. And your life is disgusting too. No family, no friends. Nobody even knows you're here. Nobody cares that you're here. You're completely alone because you're not worth caring about. Mrs. Henderson had been moved back to share my room the day before. Dr. Foster thought having a witness present might restrain Webb's behavior. He was wrong. Dr. Webb, Mrs. Henderson said firmly, that is enough. I'm reporting you. He turned to her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Report me for what? Telling the truth. This patient is a drain on resources. She's obese, old, non-compliant, and has no social value whatsoever. These are medical facts. They're not facts, they're cruelty, Mrs. Henderson shot back. She's a human being, is she? Webb asked, turning back to me. I'm not sure anymore. Humans have dignity. Humans have purpose. This is just meat taking up space. A fat, useless lump of meat that would be better off dead. That was the line. He'd finally crossed it completely. Mrs. Henderson gasped. 2 of the medical students looked horrified. One of them said, Dr. Webb, we should go. But he wasn't done. He was on a roll now, his anger and cruelty fully unleashed. You want to know what I really think? I think we should stop wasting resources on patients like this. I think we should have a 3-strike rule. If you're obese, if you're old, If you're on Medicaid and you have a major health crisis, we stabilize you and that's it. No heroic measures, no extended care, just basics and then discharge to hospice. Because people like this, he gestured at me with disgust. They're not worth saving. They've proven through their entire lives that they don't value themselves. Why should we value them? I felt something break inside me, not my spirit. That was still intact, still burning with cold rage. But my patience, my willingness to wait. Because this man had just said in front of witnesses that patients like me weren't worth saving, that we should be left to die. And I couldn't let one more day pass with him thinking he'd won. I took a deep breath, and I spoke. My voice came out clear, strong, with just a hint of the southern accent I'd worked years to minimize but which returned when I was angry. Dr. Webb. He froze, turned around slowly, stared at me in shock. You can talk. I sat up in bed without assistance, without struggle. Yes, I can talk. I've been able to talk for over a week now. I've been conscious and aware this entire time. I heard every single word you said to me, about me, every insult, every cruelty, every time you called me a fat pig, a burden, a waste of resources. I heard it all, and I remembered it all. His face went pale. The medical students were backing toward the door. Mrs. Henderson was smiling through her tears. I continued, my voice getting stronger. My name is Dr. Lorraine Baptiste. I am the former Surgeon General of the United States, appointed in I served for 4 years. After that, I founded the Baptiste Medical Foundation, a network of 47 hospitals across 12 states. This hospital, Metropolitan General, is one of mine. I own it. I own the building you're standing in. I own the equipment you use. I own the computers that process your paycheck. And I own you, Dr. Webb. Because you work for me. The color drained completely from his face. That's not. You can't. But I am, I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. Sandra, my private nurse, appeared in the doorway as if summoned. She came to my side and I took her arm, standing up slowly but steadily. You called me a fat pig who couldn't walk. Watch me walk. I took one step, then another. My right leg was weak but functional. I walked across the room to where Dr. Webb stood frozen. I stopped right in front of him and looked him directly in the eyes. You said I was worthless, that I had no social value, that I wasn't worth saving. You said people like me should be left to die. Do you remember saying that, Dr. Webb? About 2 minutes ago. He opened his mouth but no sound came out. Let me tell you who I really am, I said quietly, dangerously. I graduated magna cum laude from Howard University. I got my medical degree from Johns Hopkins. I did my residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. I became a neurosurgeon specializing in stroke intervention. Ironic, isn't it? I performed over 3,000 surgeries in my career. I saved countless lives. I became chief of neurosurgery at age 42. I was appointed Surgeon General at 51. After my term, I took my savings, my investments, my connections, and I built a medical empire worth $4.2 billion. I own 47 hospitals. I employ over 60,000 people. I serve over 2 million patients annually. And you're just an arrogant, cruel little man who thought he could torture a helpless patient because she was fat and black and on Medicaid. Dr. Webb tried to speak. I didn't know. You thought what? I asked coldly. You thought it was okay to abuse patients as long as they can't fight back? You thought your cruelty was acceptable as long as the victim was poor and vulnerable? You thought calling someone a fat pig was appropriate medical care? Tears were starting to form in his eyes. Dr. Baptiste, I am so sorry, I never meant. Yes, you did. I cut him off. You meant every word. You enjoyed it. I saw it in your face every time you came in here. You took pleasure in humiliating me, in making me feel worthless, in trying to break my spirit. I took a step closer. He actually flinched. But here's what you didn't know. I wasn't broken. I was watching. I was learning. I was documenting every word you said, every action you took, every HIPAA violation, every ethics breach, every moment of cruelty. All of it was witnessed, recorded, and documented. I have nurses who heard you. I have doctors who saw you. I have recordings of your cafeteria conversations. I have video of your grand rounds presentation where you displayed my medical records without consent. I have testimony from donors you tried to impress by mocking me. I have everything. His legs seemed to give out. He sat down heavily in the chair behind him. Please, he whispered. Please, I'll do anything. I'll apologize. You'll do nothing, I said. Because you're finished. As of this moment, you are suspended from this hospital pending a full investigation. You will surrender your credentials immediately. You will not see patients. You will not enter patient care areas. You will sit in an office and wait while we build the case that will end your medical career permanently. I turned to the medical students who were still in the doorway, watching everything with wide eyes. You six, come here. They approached hesitantly. I looked at each of them. Let this be a lesson to you. Medicine is not about power. It's not about ego. It's not about judging people based on their weight, their age, their race, or their insurance status. It's about caring for human beings when they're at their most vulnerable. Dr. Webb forgot that. Actually, I don't think he ever learned it in the first place. Don't be like him. Be better. Be kind. Be human. They nodded. Some of them crying. One of them, the young black man who tried to speak up for me, said, Dr. Baptiste, I'm so sorry we didn't do more to stop him. I softened slightly. You tried. I heard you try. That takes courage. Now you know what happens when good people stay silent. Use that knowledge. Be the doctors who speak up next time. I turned back to Dr. Webb. Security is on their way. You'll be escorted from the building. Your personal belongings will be packed and sent to you. Do not attempt to contact any staff members. Do not attempt to contact any patients. Do not attempt to defend yourself publicly. Anything you say from this point forward will be used against you in the investigation and in court. Court? He whispered. Criminal charges are being filed. Elder abuse, patient abuse, HIPAA violations, discrimination, medical malpractice, fraud. Yes, fraud. Because we found evidence you were falsifying research data. You're going to lose your medical license, Dr. Webb. Then you're probably going to jail. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Dr. Webb, one of them said, you need to come with us. He stood up shakily, looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, he said. I truly am sorry. I looked at him with absolutely no sympathy. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the fat pig turned out to be your boss. But you're not sorry for what you did. If I really were just a poor, elderly, helpless patient with no power, you'd still be tormenting me right now. So don't insult me with fake apologies. Just go. He left between the security guards, his head down, his career over. The moment he was gone, Nurse Keisha rushed in and hugged me carefully. Dr. Baptiste, you're standing, you're talking, I'm furious, I said, but I'm also free, finally free. Dr. Patricia Okoye appeared in the doorway. Dr. Baptiste, I am so deeply sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have reported him sooner. Dr. Okoye, I said, come here. She approached nervously. You witnessed, you documented, you maintained your integrity even when you were afraid. That takes strength. How would you like to be the new chief of medicine at this hospital? Her eyes went wide. What? You heard me. Dr. Foster is being demoted for allowing this to continue. Someone needs to run this hospital properly. Someone who actually cares about patients. Interested, she started crying. Yes, absolutely. Good. Report to my office Monday morning. We have a lot of work to do. Over the next hour, my room filled with people. James and Darius arrived, both of them looking relieved and furious in equal measure. Dr. Raymond Foster came, practically groveling, offering his resignation before I could fire him. I accepted it. The hospital's legal team arrived, looking terrified. I told them to cooperate fully with the investigation, or they'd be gone too. The chief nursing officer came and broke down crying when she saw me standing. We tried to stop him, she sobbed. We reported him multiple times, but Foster wouldn't act. I know, I said. That's why Foster's gone and you're getting a significant raise. Keep doing what you're doing. Protecting patients. By evening, news was spreading through the hospital like wildfire. The patient in 407 was actually Dr. Baptiste, the owner, the founder, the former Surgeon General. Staff members were coming by my room in shifts, some to apologize, some to offer testimony, some just to see if it was true. I confirmed it was true to every single one of them, and to each one I said, this isn't just about me. This is about every patient who's ever been dismissed, mocked or abused, because of how they look or what insurance they have. We're going to change that, starting now. That night, after everyone had left except James and Darius, I sat in a wheelchair, Not because I needed it, but because Sandra insisted I not overdo it on my first day of walking, and looked out the window at the city lights. Mom, James said quietly, are you okay? I thought about it. No, I said honestly, I'm not okay. What he did to me, it hurt. It hurt deeply. Not just my pride but my sense of humanity. He made me feel like I wasn't a person, like my body made me less than human. That's going to stay with me. Then why wait? Darius asked. Why let him hurt you for so long when you could have stopped him any time? I turned to look at my sons, because it wasn't enough to just stop him from hurting me. I needed to stop him from hurting anyone else ever again. If I'd revealed myself on day one, he would have gotten a slap on the wrist. Maybe suspended for a week. Maybe transferred to another hospital. But now I have enough evidence to end his career permanently. To make sure he never practices medicine again. To make an example of him that will echo through every hospital in this country. Every doctor will hear this story and think twice before they abuse a vulnerable patient. That's why I waited. James nodded slowly. You built a case. I built a fortress. I corrected. And when we're done, there won't be a medical board in America that will license him. There won't be a hospital that will hire him. There won't be a way for him to escape the consequences of his cruelty. What happens now? Darius asked. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Now I recover fully. Now I go back to work. And now Dr. Marcus Webb learns what accountability looks like. The investigation took 3 weeks. It was thorough, brutal, and comprehensive. A team of lawyers, medical ethics experts, and investigators went through every case Dr. Webb had handled in the past 5 years. They found a pattern. It wasn't just me. There were dozens of patients he'd treated poorly, all of them poor, all of them on Medicaid or uninsured, most of them people of color, many of them overweight. He'd fast-tracked wealthy white patients for experimental treatments while delaying care for the vulnerable. He'd made cruel comments to numerous patients. He'd violated HIPAA multiple times. He'd falsified research data to make himself look more accomplished. He'd accepted kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies. The list went on, and through it all I continued my recovery. Sandra worked with me every day. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. I pushed myself harder than any patient she'd ever seen. Within 3 weeks, I was walking normally. My speech was perfect. My right arm had full function back. I'd lost 20 pounds through proper rehabilitation and exercise. I looked healthy. I looked powerful. I looked nothing like the helpless woman Dr. Webb had tortured. When I was ready, when the investigation was complete, I called a meeting. Not at the hospital, at the Baptiste Medical Foundation headquarters, a gleaming tower in the financial district with my name on the building. The boardroom on the 47th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The board met quarterly, but I called an emergency session. All 15 board members, plus the chiefs of medicine from all 47 hospitals, plus legal counsel, plus media relations. The room was packed. I arrived exactly on time, walking in on my own 2 feet, wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than Dr. Webb probably made in a month. My silver locks styled elegantly, my bearing regal. Every eye in the room turned to me. Some of these people hadn't seen me in 3 months. They gasped. Dr. Baptiste, the board chair stammered. We heard you were ill, but I look recovered, I said calmly, taking my seat at the head of the table. Because I had a stroke. I spent 2 weeks in one of our hospitals, and in those 2 weeks, I experienced something that opened my eyes to systemic failures in our healthcare system. Failures that exist in our hospitals. Failures we're going to address immediately. I clicked the remote in my hand. The screens on the walls lit up. What you're about to see is difficult to watch. It's documentation of patient abuse that occurred at Metropolitan General Hospital. The patient was me. For the next 30 minutes, I showed them everything. Every recorded conversation. Every HIPAA violation. Every moment of cruelty. I played the audio of Dr. Webb calling me a fat pig. I showed the video of him dumping my food in the trash. I displayed his Grand Rounds presentation where he showed my medical records without consent. I played his cafeteria conversations where he admitted to treating patients differently based on their class and insurance. By the time I was done, multiple board members were in tears. One had left the room to vomit. The rest sat in stunned silence. This, I said quietly, happened to me, to your medical director. In our hospital. If it can happen to me, Imagine what's happening to patients who have no power, no voice, no ability to fight back. The board chair found his voice. Dr. Baptiste, I assure you we will take immediate action. Dr. Webb is already finished, I interrupted. His medical license has been suspended by the state board pending revocation. Criminal charges have been filed. He's facing multiple lawsuits. His career is over, but that's not enough. I stood up and began to pace. The question isn't just what do we do about one bad doctor. The question is what systemic failures allowed him to operate this way for years. Where were the checks and balances? Where were the patient advocates? Where was the oversight? I clicked to a new slide showing statistics. In the past 5 years at Metropolitan General alone, we've had 47 formal complaints about discriminatory care. 47. Do you know how many resulted in meaningful action? 0. We paid settlements. We made complaints go away with money. But we didn't fix anything. Another slide. Across our network of 47 hospitals, we've had over 300 complaints of discriminatory care in the past 5 years. 300 patients who felt they were treated poorly because of their race, their weight, their insurance status. We've paid out $8.3 million in settlements. But again, we didn't fix the underlying problem. The room was silent. I let it sink in, then I continued. So here's what we're going to do. First, every hospital in our network will implement a patient advocacy program. Real advocates with real power, not just complaint departments. Advocates who can observe care, question treatment decisions, and intervene when they see discrimination. Second, mandatory anti-bias training for every doctor, nurse, and staff member. Not the useless 4-hour seminars we currently do. Real training, intensive, with consequences for failure. Third, patient feedback systems that actually work. Anonymous reporting, real investigations, actual accountability. Fourth, we're implementing body-neutral care protocols. No more weight-based judgments, unless medically relevant. No more assumptions about lifestyle. No more moral judgments about patients' bodies. Fifth, recording systems in patient rooms. Not for privacy violations. Patients can control them, but so there's evidence when abuse occurs. Sixth, a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory care. One strike and you're out. I don't care if you're the best surgeon in the state. If you abuse patients, you're gone. I paused and looked around the room. And finally, I'm creating a $50 million fund for patient advocacy, research into healthcare discrimination and support for victims of medical abuse. We're going to study this problem, we're going to measure it, and we're going to fix it. The board chair cleared his throat. Dr. Baptiste, these are extensive changes. The cost alone. I don't care about the cost, I said flatly. We're a $4.2 billion organization. We can afford $50 million to treat patients with dignity, and if you think we can't, then you're not fit to be on this board. He nodded quickly. Of course. You're right. Absolutely right. Good, I said. The reforms will be implemented immediately. Full rollout within 6 months. Any hospital that doesn't comply will be sold. Any administrator who resists will be fired. Any doctor who continues discriminatory practices will be terminated and reported to licensing boards. Am I clear? A chorus of yes, Dr. Baptiste echoed around the room. Good. Now let's talk about Dr. Raymond Foster. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, we'd restructured leadership at 3 hospitals, implemented new oversight protocols, and created a task force to handle the reforms. I was exhausted but satisfied. As people filed out, Dr. Okoye approached me. She'd been there as the newly appointed chief of medicine at Metropolitan General. Dr. Baptiste, she said, thank you, not just for the reforms but for showing me that speaking up matters, that one person can make a difference. I smiled at her. You spoke up when it mattered, Dr. Okoye. You documented, you witnessed, you helped build the case. Never underestimate the power of that. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and left. James and Darius stayed behind. We stood at the windows looking out over the city. You did it, Mom, James said. You didn't just get revenge. You changed the system. I'm not done yet, I replied. The reforms are just the beginning. Now I need to make sure the story gets out. I need every doctor in America to hear what happened and understand there are consequences for cruelty. How? Darius asked. I smiled. I'm going to do something I never do. I'm going to go public. Press conference. Full story. Medical journals. News outlets. I'm going to make Dr. Marcus Webb the most infamous doctor in America, and I'm going to make sure every patient knows they have rights and power, even when they feel helpless. 2 days later, I held the press conference. It was in the main lobby of Metropolitan General Hospital, symbolic, powerful. Every major news outlet was there, medical journals, patient advocacy groups. The room was packed. I walked in wearing a white coat over my suit, the first time I'd worn a white coat since my stroke. I stood at the podium, looked at the cameras and began to speak. My name is Dr. Lorraine Baptiste. 3 months ago, I had a stroke. I was admitted to this hospital, one of my own hospitals, as an anonymous patient. For 2 weeks I was subjected to abuse, humiliation and discriminatory care by a doctor who thought I was powerless. He was wrong. And then I told the entire story. Everything. The insults. The cruelty. The fat pig comments. The food being dumped. The HIPAA violations. The donor tour. All of it. I didn't hold back. I showed video clips. I played audio recordings. I made the audience understand exactly what it felt like to be powerless and abused. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Soon the entire room was on their feet, applauding, not for me specifically, but for what the story represented: accountability, justice, the idea that even the powerful can be vulnerable, and even the vulnerable can fight back. The questions from reporters lasted an hour. Dr. Baptiste, why did you wait so long to reveal your identity? Because I needed to build a case that would ensure he could never do this to anyone else. What do you say to critics who claim you orchestrated this for publicity? I say they're welcome to experience 2 weeks of abuse and see if they think it's worth the publicity. What message do you have for other patients who've experienced discriminatory care? Document everything, speak up, find witnesses, and know that you're not alone. We're implementing reforms to make sure this never happens again. What happened to Dr. Webb? I paused, looked directly at the camera. Dr. Marcus Webb's medical license has been permanently revoked. Criminal charges are pending. He will never practice medicine again. And I want every doctor watching this to understand. This is what happens when you forget that your patients are human beings who deserve dignity and respect. Regardless of their size, their age, their race, or their insurance status, cruelty has consequences. Remember that. The press conference ended. The story went viral within hours. Fat Pig was trending on social media, but not as an insult. As a rallying cry, patients everywhere were sharing their own stories of discriminatory care. The movement I'd hoped to start was catching fire. 3 days after the press conference, I got a letter, handwritten, from Dr. Marcus Webb. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. It read, Dr. Baptiste, I know you'll never forgive me, and I'm not asking you to. I'm writing, because I need you to know that I've spent every day since my suspension thinking about what I did to you, really thinking about it. Not just regretting that I got caught, but understanding how deeply I hurt you. How wrong I was. How cruel. I grew up with money and privilege. I went to the best schools. I was told I was exceptional, my entire life. Somewhere along the way, I started believing that I was better than other people, that my education, my success, my body type made me superior. I looked at patients who didn't fit my narrow definition of deserving, and I treated them as less than human. You were right about everything you said. I enjoyed the cruelty. I felt powerful when I made you feel small. I thought your body gave me permission to strip away your humanity, and I was wrong. Completely, utterly, horrifically wrong. I'm not writing this to ask for mercy. I know I deserve everything that's happening to me. My license is gone. My reputation is destroyed. My family has disowned me. I'm working at a pharmacy now, counting pills for minimum wage. And that's exactly what I deserve. I'm writing because I want you to know that you didn't just end my career. You changed me. Every night I lie awake thinking about the pain I caused you, thinking about all the other patients I hurt over the years, thinking about the kind of doctor I could have been if I'd had even a fraction of your integrity. You spent 2 weeks enduring torture that I inflicted, and you used that suffering to change an entire system. That's more than revenge. That's transformation. I will spend the rest of my life trying to become worthy of the lesson you taught me. I know I'll probably fail, but I'm going to try. Thank you for not letting me get away with it. Thank you for making sure I can never hurt anyone else. And I'm sorry. I know those words mean nothing coming from me, but they're all I have. Marcus Webb. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. James, who was in my office, asked, Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a long moment. No, I said finally, because this isn't about him anymore. It's not about his redemption or his guilt, or his transformation. This is about making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. He's already taken up enough of my time and energy. I'm done with Marcus Webb. Fair enough, James said. So what's next? I smiled. Next, I make sure these reforms actually work. I'm going to visit every single one of our 47 hospitals over the next year. I'm going to sit with patients. I'm going to listen to their experiences. I'm going to make sure our staff understands that patient dignity isn't optional. It's fundamental. And that's exactly what I did. Over the next 12 months, I traveled to every hospital in our network. I didn't announce my visits in advance. I would show up, sometimes in regular clothes, sometimes in a wheelchair to see how mobility-impaired patients were treated, sometimes with a volunteer badge so I could observe without staff knowing who I was. I watched, I listened, I documented. Some hospitals were doing beautifully, treating every patient with respect and dignity regardless of their size, race or insurance. Those hospitals got expanded funding and public recognition. Other hospitals were still struggling with ingrained biases and discriminatory practices. Those hospitals got intensive intervention, new leadership, mandatory training, and constant oversight until they improved. And a few hospitals were so resistant to change, so stuck in their old ways, that I sold them. I wasn't going to have the Baptiste name on institutions that refused to treat patients with basic human dignity. The reforms worked. Within 18 months, our patient satisfaction scores had increased by 34%. Our discrimination complaints dropped by 67%. Staff retention improved because good healthcare workers wanted to work in environments that valued patients, and our financial performance actually improved because treating patients well turned out to be good for business. Who knew? The story of Room 407 became a case study in medical schools across the country. My experience was taught as an example of systemic discrimination in healthcare. Dr. Webb became the cautionary tale, the doctor whose cruelty cost him everything, and the reforms we implemented became the standard that other hospital networks tried to emulate. But the most meaningful changes weren't in the statistics or the policies. They were in the individual moments. Like the time I visited our hospital in Detroit and met a 72-year-old black woman named Dolores who'd been admitted for diabetes complications. She was overweight, on Medicaid, and terrified of how she'd be treated. When I sat with her, just another visitor as far as she knew, she told me about her fears. "I'm always afraid they're going to judge me," she said quietly, "because of my size, because I'm poor, because I'm old. I'm afraid they'll think I'm not worth helping." I took her hand. "Do you know the story of Dr. Baptiste in room 407? Her eyes lit up. "Everyone knows that story. That doctor who owned the whole hospital and he didn't even know. She made them change everything." I smiled. "What if I told you that story was about making sure you never have to be afraid again? That every patient in this hospital is supposed to be treated with dignity regardless of their size or insurance?" "That would be nice," she said wistfully. "But things don't really change that much, do they?" "Sometimes they do," I said. "Sometimes one person's pain can become everyone else's protection. Sometimes the worst experiences lead to the best reforms. Sometimes justice actually happens." I squeezed her hand. "You're worth helping, Dolores. You're worth dignity and respect and excellent care. And if anyone in this hospital treats you otherwise, you tell them you know Dr. Baptiste's story. You tell them there are consequences for cruelty now. And then you ask to speak to the patient advocate, who will make sure things are made right." Her eyes filled with tears. "You really think it's different now?" "I know it is," I said, "because I made sure of it." Later that day, I revealed myself to Dolores. Her shock and joy were worth everything I'd been through. "You're her," she gasped. "You're Dr. Baptiste? The one from the story?" "I'm her," I confirmed. "And you're exactly why I did what I did. So patients like you, like me, never have to be afraid of the people who are supposed to heal us." She hugged me and cried, and I let her because I understood. Because I'd been where she was, vulnerable, afraid, judged for my body and my circumstances, and now I had the power to make sure that experience became rarer and rarer. 6 months after that, I received an award from the National Medical Association for transformative leadership in eliminating healthcare discrimination. The ceremony was in Washington, D.C., in a ballroom full of doctors, activists and policymakers. When I went up to accept the award, I looked out at the audience and saw so many faces, black, white, Asian, Latino, young, old, thin, fat, every variation of human beings who'd chosen careers in healing. This award isn't for me, I said into the microphone. It's for every patient who's ever been dismissed, mocked or abused in a healthcare setting. It's for Mrs. Gloria Henderson, who witnessed my abuse and spoke up even when it was uncomfortable. It's for Nurse Keisha Williams, who documented everything and made the critical phone call that set justice in motion. It's for Dr. Patricia Okoye, who maintained her integrity even under pressure. It's for my sons, who wanted immediate revenge but trusted me to handle things my way. It's for every medical student who tried to speak up against Dr. Webb's cruelty. It's for every patient advocate, every whistleblower, every person who sees injustice and refuses to stay silent. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. What happened to me in room 407 was horrific. But it taught me something important. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Being unable to speak doesn't mean you're not thinking. Being fat doesn't mean you're lazy. Being old doesn't mean you're worthless. Being on Medicaid doesn't mean you're less deserving of dignity. These are truths we should all know, but sometimes we forget them. Sometimes we need to be reminded in painful, dramatic ways. I held up the award. This represents a promise that Baptiste Medical Foundation will never stop fighting for patient dignity. A promise that we'll continue to innovate, to reform, to hold ourselves accountable. A promise that the suffering I experienced wasn't in vain. It became the catalyst for change that will protect thousands of patients for years to come. The audience stood and applauded, and as I looked out at them I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not because the pain was gone, it would always be part of me. Not because justice had been served, Webb's punishment would never undo what he did, but because I'd taken something terrible and transformed it into something meaningful. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window and thought about everything that had happened, from the moment I woke up in room 407, unable to speak, to this moment holding an award for the reforms that came from that suffering. I thought about Dr. Marcus Webb, working in a pharmacy somewhere, his dreams of medical greatness destroyed by his own cruelty. I didn't feel sorry for him, he'd earned every consequence, but I didn't feel the burning rage anymore either. I felt something more like sadness that he'd wasted his talent and education on cruelty instead of compassion. I thought about all the patients who would never experience what I experienced because systems were now in place to protect them. That was worth it. That made the suffering meaningful. My phone rang. It was Nurse Keisha, who'd become a close friend and ally in the years since room 407. Dr. Baptiste, I'm calling because something happened today that I thought you'd want to know about. Tell me, I said. A patient came into Metropolitan General today. Older black woman, overweight, on Medicaid. She had chest pain and was really scared. And you know what happened? What? The entire staff treated her like royalty. The ER doctor spent 30 minutes with her, really listening to her symptoms. The nurses were attentive and kind. Someone from patient advocacy came by to check on her within an hour. When she needed to be admitted, they gave her a private room even though she has Medicaid. And when she asked why everyone was being so nice, do you know what the doctor told her? I smiled. Already knowing. What did he tell her? He said, because of Dr. Baptiste, because of room 407, because we learned that every patient deserves to be treated the way we'd want our own mothers treated. Dr. Baptiste. She started crying. She said she'd been afraid to come to the hospital because she thought they'd judge her for her weight. She thought they'd dismiss her because of her insurance. But instead she got excellent care and genuine respect. And she said to tell you thank you if I ever met you. She said to tell you that the fat pig from room 407 changed her life. I felt tears running down my face. What's her name? Margaret Collins. She's 65, retired school teacher, lives alone, has high blood pressure and diabetes. Just a regular person who needed help and was afraid she wouldn't be treated with dignity. Is she still admitted? Yes. Overnight observation for the chest pain. It turned out to be angina. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but they're making sure she's stable. I'm coming, I said. Tomorrow morning, I want to meet her. The next morning I drove to Metropolitan General Hospital, the same hospital where I'd spent 2 weeks being tortured, but it wasn't the same place anymore. The lobby had been renovated. There was now a patient advocacy office prominently displayed with open doors and welcoming staff. There were posters about patient rights. There were comment boxes where patients could provide feedback anonymously. The changes were visible everywhere. I went up to Margaret Collins' room, knocked softly. Heard her call come in. I entered and saw a woman who could have been me 3 years ago. Older, black, larger bodied, lying in a hospital bed looking vulnerable but receiving good care. Mrs. Collins, I said, my name is Dr. Baptiste. She interrupted, her eyes going wide. Oh my God, you're Dr. Baptiste. From the story, from room 407, I came to her bedside and took her hand. I heard you were here. I heard the staff treated you well. I wanted to meet you and make sure you're okay. She started crying immediately. I was so scared to come here. I've been having chest pain for 3 days, but I kept putting it off because I thought they'd judge me. I thought they'd look at me and see a fat woman who probably ate herself into a heart attack. I thought they'd treat me like I deserved it. But they didn't. I said gently. No, she said, shaking her head in wonder. They were kind, really kind. The doctor listened to everything I said. The nurses checked on me constantly. Nobody made me feel ashamed of my body. Nobody blamed me for being sick. It was like being treated like a person, like a human being who mattered. You do matter, I told her. Every patient matters. That's why I told my story. That's why I implemented these reforms. So that women like us, like you and me, never have to be afraid of seeking medical care. Never have to worry that we'll be judged or mocked or dismissed because of how we look. Margaret squeezed my hand. They told me what happened to you, how that doctor treated you, how he called you horrible things, and you were the one who owned the hospital the whole time. I confirmed, and I could have revealed myself immediately and stopped him. But then he would have just gotten a slap on the wrist and gone on to abuse other patients at other hospitals. Instead, I endured it, documented it, and used it to create systemic change, so that when you walked through those doors yesterday, scared and in pain, you got treated the way every patient deserves to be treated. She looked at me with such gratitude and understanding. It must have been horrible, what he did to you. It was, I said honestly. It was humiliating and painful, and it hurt in ways I'm still processing. But you know what? If my suffering meant that you got excellent care yesterday, if it meant that thousands of other patients will be treated with dignity instead of cruelty, then it was worth it. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for going through that. Thank you for being strong enough to wait and plan and create real change. Thank you for thinking about people like me when you could have just gotten revenge and moved on. I stayed with Margaret for an hour talking about her life, her fears, her health. When I left, I felt lighter than I had in years, because this was the real victory, not Webb's destroyed career, not the awards or recognition, but this moment with this one patient who felt safe and respected in a hospital that used to be a place of cruelty. Over the next few years, I continued the work. The reforms spread beyond Baptiste Medical Foundation to other hospital networks. The story of Room 407 became required reading in medical ethics classes. Patient advocacy programs became standard across the country, and slowly, incrementally, healthcare started to change. It wasn't perfect. Systemic discrimination doesn't disappear overnight, but it was better. Measurably, significantly better. I eventually retired from day-to-day operations at age 72, though I stayed on as chairman of the board. I spent my time visiting hospitals, sitting with patients, listening to their experiences, and continuing to advocate for dignity in healthcare. And sometimes when I was tired or frustrated, or wondering if all the pain had been worth it, I would get a letter from a patient who'd received excellent care and wanted me to know, from a medical student who'd been inspired by the story to become a patient advocate, from a nurse who'd spoken up against discrimination because she knew there would be support. Those letters sustained me. They reminded me why I'd endured 2 weeks of torture instead of revealing myself immediately. They reminded me that one person's suffering transformed into action could protect countless others. On my 75th birthday, my sons threw me a party at the Baptiste Medical Foundation headquarters. The ballroom was filled with people, board members, hospital staff, patient advocates, former patients, friends, family. Nurse Keisha was there, now a vice president. Dr. Koya was there, having just been named to a national medical ethics board. Mrs. Henderson was there, healthy and spry at 80, still telling everyone who'd listen about what she witnessed in room 407. As I looked around the room at all these faces, people whose lives had been touched by what happened to me, people who'd turned that tragedy into meaningful change, I felt something profound. Not happiness. Exactly. Not vindication. Something more like completion, like a circle closing, like a story ending the way it needed to end. James stood to give a toast. Mom, he said, his voice emotional, when you had your stroke, when we found out what was happening to you, I wanted to burn that hospital to the ground. I wanted immediate, devastating revenge. But you made us wait. You made us document. You made us build a case not just against one bad doctor but against an entire system of discriminatory care. At the time I didn't understand. I thought you were being too patient, too strategic, maybe even too forgiving, but now I understand. You weren't being patient. You were being powerful. You were thinking beyond yourself, beyond your own pain. To all the patients who would come after you, you transformed your worst experience into your greatest legacy. He raised his glass to Dr. Lorraine Baptiste, who taught us that real strength isn't about fighting back immediately, it's about fighting back effectively, who showed us that vulnerability can become power, who proved that even in our darkest moments, we can create light for others. To Mom, to Rain, the room echoed. To Dr. Baptiste, I stood up, tears running down my face, and looked at all these beautiful people who'd been part of this journey. Thank you, I said simply. Thank you for believing in me when I was at my most vulnerable. Thank you for documenting, witnessing, and supporting the reforms. Thank you for understanding that this was never about revenge. It was about justice. And thank you for continuing the work even when I'm no longer there to push it forward. I paused, gathering my thoughts. What happened to me in room 407 was the worst experience of my life. Worse than the stroke itself. Worse than any professional setback I've ever faced. Being called a fat pig. Being starved, being displayed like an object, being treated as less than human. It broke something in me, but in breaking I was forced to rebuild, and in rebuilding I became stronger, more focused, more committed to ensuring no one else would have to endure what I endured. I looked directly at the camera that was recording the event for our hospital's training programs. If you're watching this as part of your medical training, I want you to understand something. Your patients are not their bodies. They are not their insurance cards. They are not their diagnoses or their lab values or their weight. They are human beings with lives and families, and fears and hopes and dignity that must be protected, always, without exception, regardless of how they look, how much money they have or how well they've taken care of themselves. I smiled. And if you can't see your patients as fully human, if you find yourself judging them, mocking them, treating them as less than, then medicine is not your calling. Find another profession, because healthcare is a sacred trust, and cruelty has no place in it, ever. The room erupted in applause, and as I stood there surrounded by love and support and evidence of real change, I thought about Dr. Marcus Webb one last time. I wondered if he was watching this, if he understood now what he'd destroyed, not just his own career but his chance to be part of something meaningful. I wondered if he'd ever truly understood that the woman he'd tortured was never weak, never helpless, never less than human. I was just temporarily unable to speak, and when I got my voice back, I used it to make sure his cruelty became the catalyst for change. That night, after the party ended and everyone went home, I sat in my office on the 47th floor and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there were patients in our hospitals, receiving care, being treated with dignity and respect, because of reforms that grew from my pain. Somewhere out there were doctors and nurses who'd heard the story of Room 407, and changed how they practiced medicine. Somewhere out there were vulnerable people who felt a little safer, a little more protected, because one woman had refused to let cruelty go unpunished. I pulled out the letter from Dr. Webb that I'd saved all these years, read it one more time. Then I did something I'd never done before. I wrote back. Dr. Webb, I wrote, I received your letter 4 years ago. I didn't respond then because I wasn't ready. I'm responding now because I want you to understand something. I don't forgive you. I may never forgive you. What you did to me caused harm that still echoes in my life. But I do want you to know that the suffering you inflicted wasn't wasted. It became the foundation for reforms that have protected thousands of patients. Your cruelty, documented and exposed, became a teaching tool that has changed how medicine is practiced. In that sense, you contributed to something positive, not through your healing but through your harm being used as a cautionary tale. I hope you've become a better person. I hope you've learned from your mistakes. I hope you spend your life trying to make amends in whatever ways you can, but whether you have or haven't doesn't really matter to me anymore. Because this story was never really about you. It was about the patients you hurt and the system that allowed you to hurt them. It was about creating change that would outlast both of us. You were just the catalyst, the villain whose cruelty made the need for reform impossible to ignore. Thank you for being so thoroughly documentably terrible that you made my case irrefutable. In that way you gave me a gift, though it was a gift wrapped in trauma. I've turned that trauma into transformation, and that's the last thought I'll ever spare for you. Dr. Lorraine Baptiste. I sealed the letter, addressed it, and left it on my desk to be mailed in the morning. Then I went home to my modest apartment. I still lived in the same place, still drove a reasonable car, still wore clothes until they wore out, because the experience in room 407 had reinforced what I'd always known. Power doesn't come from displays of wealth. It comes from dignity, integrity, and the ability to turn suffering into strength. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since my stroke. Because the work was done, the reforms were in place, the story was told, the system was changed, and Dr. Marcus Webb, who'd once called me a fat pig and told me I wasn't worth saving, had unwittingly helped me save thousands of other patients from experiencing what I experienced. In the end, I'd won. Not through revenge, though there was certainly justice in his downfall. I'd won by refusing to let his cruelty define me, by using my temporary powerlessness to expose systemic failures, by transforming personal trauma into institutional change, by remembering, even in my darkest moments, that I was Dr. Lorraine Baptiste, former Surgeon General, Medical Foundation founder, neurosurgeon, leader, and no amount of abuse could take that away from me. I was never the fat pig he called me. I was never worthless. I was never less than human. I was just temporarily unable to speak. And when I got my voice back, I used it to roar. That's the story of room 407. Not a story about revenge, though revenge was certainly served. Not a story about suffering, though suffering was endured. It's a story about power, how it can be misused, how it can be reclaimed, and how it can be wielded to protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. It's a story about dignity, how it can be stripped away and how it can be restored, not just for one person but for everyone. It's a story about transformation, turning the worst experience of my life into the most meaningful work of my career. And it's a story about justice, real, systemic, lasting justice that changes lives. Dr. Marcus Webb thought he had power over me when I was in that bed, unable to speak, unable to defend myself. He thought my body made me worthless. He thought my silence meant weakness. He was wrong about everything. I had all the power. I just had to wait until I was strong enough to use it. And when I did, I didn't just destroy one cruel doctor. I transformed an entire system. That's what real power looks like. And that's the legacy of room 407. The end. Thank you for watching.